My son-in-law's text came through at 9:47 p.m. 14 words. Don't come tomorrow. It's too much trouble right now. We need space. I read it 4 times standing in my kitchen with a birthday card already signed. 24 hours later, I was sitting in a parked car outside his apartment building, holding a wrapped present nobody wanted. And a man I'd never met was calling my phone to say, "Mrs. Hensley, you need to come inside." I didn't know yet that those 7 words would be the last normal thing that happened to me for 2 weeks. My name is Grace Hensley. Everyone calls me Gracie, except the people I've worked with, who mostly called me Hensley. I'm 67 years old. I spent 36 years as a licensed general contractor in Springfield, Missouri, renovating everything from bungalows in the Roundtree neighborhood to commercial storefronts off Battlefield Road to half the kitchens in Galloway. I ran my own crew. I pulled my own permits. I believed, right up until that Tuesday in August, that if you kept showing up for your family, kept your word, and kept your mouth shut about the things that annoyed you, love would take care of the rest. I was wrong about that. Not about the showing up part, about the rest. Because showing up isn't always enough when somebody is working very hard behind a closed door to make sure you never see what's actually happening. This became one of those moments I'll carry for the rest of my life. The kind you replay at 2 in the morning when the house is quiet. But let me back up, because none of this makes sense unless you understand where I was standing before that phone rang. My husband Frank passed 2 years ago this past March. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed late, gone in 4 months. 37 years of marriage ended in a hospice room on Sunshine Street with a box fan running because he liked the white noise. I won't dwell on that because this isn't really his story, but I need you to understand that losing him rearranged everything in me. I had one daughter left in this world who mattered to me the way he had, and that was Lily. Lily is 34. Good kid. Always was. Quiet. A little too eager to keep the peace, which I used to think was a virtue in her, until I learned the hard way. It can also be a weakness. She works as a claims adjuster for a regional insurance company, transferred to their Tulsa office 3 years ago for a promotion that came with a 14% raise and, frankly, more headaches than money. She married Mark Calloway a year after that move. I liked him fine at the wedding. He was polished, quick with a compliment, good at making a room feel warmer just by walking into it. Frank would have said he was a lot of charm for not much backbone. But Frank said things like that about people before he really knew them, and sometimes he was wrong. This time he wasn't. They had my granddaughter Nora 2 years ago this coming October. I drove down to Tulsa for the birth, sat in the waiting room of St. Francis Hospital for 11 hours drinking bad coffee out of a machine that took exact change only. And when they finally let me hold her, 6 pounds 14 ounces, red-faced and furious at the world the way all newborns are, something in my chest that had gone quiet since Frank died woke back up. I want to be clear about this, because people ask me sometimes if I regret how close I got to that girl, given everything that happened later. I don't. Not for 1 second. That's the part revenge stories never tell you honestly enough. The love was real before any of the rest of it started. That's what made it hurt. For the first year, I drove down to Tulsa almost every month. 3 hours each way on Highway 44, past Joplin, past the Oklahoma state line, radio tuned to whatever AM station would hold a signal that far out. I'd bring groceries because young families never have enough of the boring stuff. Diapers, coffee filters, laundry pods. I'd bring Nora something small every time. A cloth doll, a set of stacking cups, nothing extravagant. Mark used to call it Grandma's Care Package Day and post pictures online with little heart emojis under them. Lily used to walk me to my truck when I left and say, "Thanks for coming, Mum. Means a lot." Those were good years. I want you to hold on to that image because it matters for what comes later. Somewhere around 18 months ago, something started to shift. Small things first. I'd call on a Sunday, our standing time since Nora was born, and Lily wouldn't pick up. She'd text back an hour later. "Sorry, busy day. talk later. Later would come and go. I told myself she was a working mother with a toddler. That busy was just what 34 looks like now. My own mother used to say the same thing about me when I was that age and building the business, so I didn't push. But the visits started changing too. Mark began texting me the week before, sometimes the day before, saying Nora had a cold, or they had a family thing on Lily's side of things that had nothing to do with me, or, this one stuck with me, that the apartment's a mess right now, maybe next month. I didn't know it yet, but I was being managed, slowly, carefully, the way you turn down a thermostat 1 degree at a time so nobody in the room notices they're getting cold. I mentioned it to my brother Jean, who lives 40 minutes from me in Nixa. Jean is 71, sharp as a tack, outlived 1 wife and 1 bypass surgery, and doesn't have much patience for nonsense. Gracie, he told me over coffee at the Cracker Barrel off James River Freeway. When a young husband starts controlling when a grandmother gets to see her own granddaughter, that's not about scheduling, that's about power. You mark my words. I told him he was being dramatic. He told me to call him back in 6 months and tell him he was wrong. I never got the chance. Because 6 months later, I was sitting in a parked car outside Mark's apartment building, watching my own reflection in the windshield, holding a present with a 4-year-old's name on it, and a stranger was calling to tell me to come inside. Let me tell you about that day properly, because I've replayed it more times than I can count, and I want to get every piece of it right. It was a Tuesday, August the 11th. Nora's birthday party had been scheduled for that Saturday, but I'd asked Lily 2 weeks earlier if I could come down early on my own, just to have a quiet afternoon with her, before the party got loud with other kids and cousins from Mark's side. Lily said, "Sure, Mum, come Tuesday. Mark's going to grill something." I bought Nora a wooden dollhouse kit from a shop on Commercial Street, $42, hand-painted, the kind of thing that doesn't need batteries and doesn't break. I wrapped it in yellow paper myself, badly, the way a woman who spent her life around drywall and framing hammers wraps things. I packed an overnight bag because Lily had said I could stay in their guest room, which used to be Mark's home office, before Nora outgrew the crib. I left Springfield at 11 in the morning, 3 hours down 44, stopped once in Veneta for gas and a Diet Coke, pulled into the parking lot of the Copper Ridge Apartments on East 71st Street in Tulsa, right around 2:20 in the afternoon. I remember the temperature because it was on the bank sign across the street, 96 degrees. I remember sitting in my truck for a second, looking at the wrapped dollhouse on the passenger seat, feeling that particular kind of happy that comes with knowing you're about to see a face that lights up when it sees yours. My phone buzzed at 2:24. "Mark, don't come today. Lily's not feeling well, and honestly, Grace, it's too much trouble right now. We need some space as a family. I'll let you know about the party. Grace, not Mum, not even a joke name, just Grace, like I was a neighbor he was putting off, like I was being rerouted." I sat there in that parking lot with the engine running and the AC blowing, and I read it maybe 4 times. Same as I'd read the one the night before. Then I did something I'm not proud of, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I didn't drive away. I put the truck in park right there in a visitor spot, and I sat. I want to be honest with you about why. It wasn't stubbornness. Not entirely. Something in the wording bothered me. Too much trouble right now. Not Nora's contagious, not we're swamped, but too much trouble, like I was a burden being weighed against something else, and Lily not feeling well. Lily, who 2 days earlier had texted me a photograph of Nora eating watermelon on their little balcony, smiling, looking fine, the whole family looking fine. Something didn't sit right. The same something Jean had been warning me about at that Cracker Barrel table for 6 months. So I sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes. I didn't know it yet, but that was the smartest thing I did all day. Because at 3:06 p.m., a man I had never met called my cell phone. "Mrs. Hensley, this is Roy Castellano. I manage the Copper Ridge property. I got your number off the guarantor paperwork on Unit 2114. I need you to come inside." I felt my whole chest go cold. the way it does when you know before you know. Is my daughter all right? There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause a decent man gives you before he says something he wishes he didn't have to. I think you should just come up, ma'am. Apartment 214. I'll meet you at the door. I left that dollhouse on the passenger seat. I didn't lock the truck. I don't remember the walk from the parking lot to the building. Don't remember the stairs. Only remember that by the time I reached the second floor, my legs were moving faster than I'd moved in years. And a man I didn't recognize, mid-60s maybe, standing outside apartment 216 with his arms crossed and a look on his face I can only describe as relief mixed with fury, said, "You're the grandmother? Thank God. I've been trying to get someone here for 3 days. 3 days. I want you to hold on to that number, because everything that came after built on it." Welcome back to Her Diaries. If you're just joining us, grab something to drink and get comfortable, because this story only gets heavier before it gets better. And if you've been with us before, you already know. Hit that subscribe button now, because you're going to want to see how this family came out the other side. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from tonight. Now, back to that hallway. Roy Castellano met me at the door to 214 with a master key already in his hand and an expression that told me he'd rehearsed what he was about to say and still didn't want to say it. "Ma'am, I want to be up front with you before we go in. We got a welfare call from your neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, 3 days ago. Said he hadn't seen your daughter leave for work, hadn't heard the baby, and the mail was piling up. We knocked twice. Nobody answered, and by law, I can't force entry without either a police wellness check or direct authorization from someone on the lease or the guarantor agreement. That's you. I've been trying every number I had for you since Sunday. I hadn't gotten a single call from that number. I checked later. Every attempt Roy Castellano made had gone to a Tulsa number that rang twice and disconnected, which told me later, once I understood the whole picture, that somebody had been screening what reached me. And I don't mean the property manager. He opened the door. The apartment was dark, blinds drawn in the middle of the afternoon, and it smelled the way a place smells when nobody has taken out the trash or opened a window in days. I called out for Lily. Nothing. I called for Nora, and that silence was worse than any sound could have been. I found my daughter on the bathroom floor of that apartment. Conscious, but barely, curled against the base of the tub in a t-shirt soaked through with sweat, an empty insulin pen on the tile beside her. Lily was diagnosed as a type 1 diabetic at 19 years old. She manages it well, always has, checks her levels, carries glucose tablets, has for 15 years. But a woman alone for 3 days, unable to reach her supplies properly because, as I learned within the hour, her glucometer and her backup insulin had been packed into a suitcase that wasn't hers, sitting by the front door, ready to go somewhere she didn't know about. I got down on that bathroom floor with my daughter, the way I hadn't held her since she was small enough for me to carry on my hip through the Missouri State Fair, and I called 911 with a hand that would not stop shaking. Roy Castellano stood in the doorway with his phone, already dialing too. And Mr. Alvarez, God bless that man, went and got a wet towel and a glass of orange juice without anybody asking him to, because he said later, "In my day, you didn't wait to be told what a sick person needed." Lily was semi-conscious, blood sugar critically low, dehydrated. Disoriented enough that when the paramedics asked her her own name, she got it right, but couldn't tell them what day it was. The lead paramedic, a woman named Delacroix, looked at me after they'd gotten a line in her and gotten some color back into her face, and said, "Ma'am, if this had gone another 12 hours, we'd be having a very different conversation." I want you to sit with that phrase the way I had to. A very different conversation. That's the kind of sentence that rearranges a person permanently. And Nora, my granddaughter, not in that apartment, not with Lily, nowhere. I asked Roy Castellano where the child was, and he told me he didn't know, that he'd only ever seen the husband's car in the lot maybe once in the last 4 days, and that Mr. Alvarez had mentioned Mark had been loading things into a rented SUV over the weekend, a stroller, boxes, suitcases. while Lily, according to Mr. Alvarez's account through the thin apartment wall, had been asking him in a raised voice where he thought he was taking their daughter. I want to be honest about the state I was in at that moment. Riding in the back of an ambulance, holding my daughter's hand while paramedics worked, not knowing where my 4-year-old granddaughter was, not knowing if my son-in-law had simply left or had taken her somewhere I'd never find her. I have run a business, buried a husband, and built a life out of staying calm under pressure. That afternoon, for the first time since Frank's funeral, I did not feel calm. I felt like the floor of the world had opened underneath me. They admitted Lily to St. Francis, the same hospital where Nora had been born. And by 7 p.m. that evening, her numbers had stabilized enough for the doctor, a young woman named Dr. Osi, to tell me she'd be all right, that she needed fluids and monitoring overnight, but the danger had passed. I sat in a plastic chair beside that hospital bed and watched my daughter sleep, and somewhere around 9, she woke up enough to focus her eyes on me and say 4 words that told me everything I needed to know about what the last several months had actually been. "Mum, he took her." I didn't sleep that night. I sat in that hospital room chair until the sun came up, and somewhere around midnight, I called the one person in this world I trusted to help me think clearly when I couldn't do it myself. Connie Delgado and I have known each other since 1989, back when she was still a Springfield PD detective and I was renovating the station house on Chestnut Expressway on a city contract. Connie retired 9 years ago, but never really stopped being a cop, the way some people never really stop being what they spent 30 years becoming. I called her at 12:40 a.m. and told her everything. The cancelled visit, the landlord's call, the 3-day welfare check, my daughter on that bathroom floor, my granddaughter nowhere to be found. Connie was quiet for a long moment on the other end of the line. The way she used to get quiet, right before she told you something you needed to hear, whether you wanted to or not. "Gracie," she said, "this didn't happen in 3 days. Something's been building for months. You said the visits started getting cut back 1.5 years ago. About that. Then that's when it started. Whatever this is, he's been laying groundwork a long time. I want you to do something for me before you do anything else. Don't confront anybody. Don't post anything. Don't call his family. Don't do a single thing that tips your hand. You get your daughter stable, and you let me start pulling threads quietly. Can you do that?" I told her I could, though every instinct in my body wanted to drive straight to wherever Mark Calloway was and demand to know where my granddaughter had gone. But 36 years of business had taught me the same lesson Connie was teaching me now. The woman who reacts first loses. The woman who gathers everything first wins. By 9 the next morning, with Lily resting and a nurse named Patricia promising to call me the second there was any change, Connie was already at the Copper Ridge Apartments talking to Roy Castellano and, more importantly, to Mr. Alvarez, who turned out to be one of the most important people in this entire story. And I want to give him the space he deserves, because without him, I don't know that I'd still have a daughter. Lyle Alvarez was 68 years old, a retired school maintenance worker who'd lived in apartment 216 for 11 years and had, by his own account, watched Nora grow from a car seat carried up the stairs to a little girl who waved at him through the fence of the shared courtyard every single morning. He told Connie, and later told me himself, over coffee at his kitchen table, that over the past 6 months he'd watched something curdle next door. Raised voices late at night. Mark leaving for hours at a time, sometimes overnight, with Nora in tow. No explanation offered to anyone. Lily looking thinner, quieter, sometimes with her blinds drawn in the middle of the day like a woman who didn't want anyone seeing in. "I called that girl's mother 3 times in the last 2 months, Lyle told me, his hand resting flat on his kitchen table like he was steadying himself, even in the retelling. Every time it went to a number that wasn't working right. I didn't know it then, but I know now. Somebody didn't want that call getting through. That single detail became the thread Connie pulled hardest on, because it meant this wasn't chaos. It was engineered. Connie spent 4 days working through what she still had access to as a retired officer, with contacts who owed her favors, plus what any determined woman with a laptop and a library card can find if she knows where to look. What she found, laid out on my kitchen table back in Springfield on a Saturday afternoon while Lily slept upstairs in her childhood bedroom, changed the shape of everything I thought I understood about my son-in-law. Mark had lost his job as a marketing coordinator at a firm in downtown Tulsa 14 months earlier. He never told Lily. For over a year, he had been leaving the apartment every weekday morning, dressed for an office that no longer employed him, driving to a coffee shop on Yale Avenue, and spending his days there while collecting unemployment under a different mailing address, a P.O. box he'd rented 3 towns over, so the paperwork wouldn't show up at their apartment. Lily had been giving him half her paycheck every 2 weeks for what she believed was their household budget: rent, groceries, Nora's daycare. Connie's research, cross-referenced against bank statements Lily eventually authorized me to help her pull, showed that roughly $31,000 over 14 months had gone somewhere other than the household. Some of it went to credit cards Lily didn't know existed, cards that had in turn funded regular weekend trips to Dallas that Mark told Lily were guys' trips with co-workers. Except the co-workers didn't exist anymore. The company had let him go over a year ago. The Dallas trips, it turned out, were to see a woman named Jess Whitfield, someone Mark had known before he ever met my daughter, a relationship Connie traced back through phone records that Lily, thank God, still had legal access to as a joint account holder. And that suitcase by the front door, the one packed with Lily's diabetic supplies mixed in among Nora's clothes. Mark had been planning to leave for Dallas permanently, not with Lily's blessing, not with a custody agreement, with Nora, on a Wednesday. While Lily was recovering, or not recovering, from whatever happened after he'd apparently, according to what Mr. Alvarez overheard through that shared wall, deliberately delayed calling anyone when he found her in distress that Friday night, choosing instead to load the car and leave her there. I want to be careful here, because I know how a story like this can tip into something that sounds too calculated to be believed. But Connie found the receipts, literally. A U-Haul reservation for a one-way trailer picked up that Saturday morning, the very morning of Nora's planned birthday party. Destination: Plano, Texas. A lease application already submitted under Mark's name alone for a 2-bedroom apartment 11 minutes from Jess Whitfield's address. And an email, printed and placed in the folder Connie handed me, sent from Mark's account to his brother 9 days before I ever got that text cancelling my visit. Once I'm out of Tulsa, this is going to be so much cleaner. Lily will fight for a while, but she'll get tired. Her mum is the only real problem. She won't let this go easy. So I need her out of the picture until we're already gone. I need her out of the picture. That was me. 14 words in a text message calling me too much trouble were never really about a Tuesday afternoon visit. They were about making sure the one person paying close attention wasn't standing in the room when the walls came down. Here's where I want to pause and tell you something, because right up until Connie showed me those printouts, some small, stubborn part of me was still holding out hope that this was a misunderstanding, that Mark was overwhelmed, maybe going through something private, and that I'd overreacted. I think most of us hold on to that hope longer than we should, because the alternative is admitting someone you welcomed into your family, someone you drove 3 hours a month to see, was capable of watching your daughter suffer and calculating whether it was convenient to help her. That hope ended the moment I read that email. Lily read it too, sitting at my kitchen table in Springfield, 8 days after I found her on that bathroom floor, color back in her face, blood sugar stable, a folder of her husband's betrayal spread out in front of her like a verdict. She didn't cry, not right away. She sat very still, the way I remember sitting still the day the doctor told us about Frank's diagnosis. That particular stillness that comes right before a person's whole understanding of their life gets rewritten. He left me on that floor, she said it finally, quiet, almost to herself. He was already loading the car. He heard me. Mr. Alvarez heard everything through the wall. He just left. I put my hand on my daughter's shoulder. And I didn't say anything, because there wasn't anything to say that would make that true fact smaller than it was. But I want to tell you about Nora, because that's the part that mattered most, and I don't want you sitting through this whole story worried about that little girl without an answer. Mark had not, in fact, taken her to Texas that Wednesday. Roy Castellano's welfare check and my unplanned arrival had interrupted his timeline. When Connie and I, working with an attorney I'd hired named Priscilla Boone out of downtown Tulsa, filed for an emergency custody order the following Monday, based on documented abandonment and endangerment, the court granted Lily temporary sole physical custody within 72 hours. Expedited because of the medical emergency and Mr. Alvarez's sworn statement about what he'd witnessed. Nora had been staying, it turned out, with Mark's sister in Broken Arrow the entire time. Safe, fed, cared for, but deliberately kept away from her mother while the exit plan finished forming. I drove to that house in Broken Arrow myself, the day the order came through, Priscilla Boone's paralegal beside me with the paperwork in a folder on her lap. And when that front door opened and I saw my granddaughter's face, still round with baby fat, still missing her front tooth from where she'd tripped off the porch steps that spring, I did something I hadn't done in public since Frank's funeral. I knelt down right there on the porch steps, and I held that girl, and I cried, and I didn't care who saw it. "Grandma," she said into my shoulder, like it was the most ordinary thing in the world, like none of the last 2 weeks had happened at all to her. "Did you bring the dollhouse?" I had. It was still in my truck, still wrapped in that badly folded yellow paper, and I gave it to her right there in that driveway in Broken Arrow, and for about 30 seconds, none of the rest of it mattered. Now, I promised you a sweet payoff in this story, and here it is. Because a story like this isn't worth telling if it's only about what someone loses. Lyle Alvarez is the reason my daughter is alive. Not a doctor, not a lawyer, not me. A 68-year-old retired maintenance worker who noticed a light not turning on and a mail pile that shouldn't have been there, who tried 3 times to reach a phone number that had been quietly sabotaged, who finally, on the 4th day, walked down to the leasing office himself and refused to leave until Roy Castellano promised him he'd force the issue. When I asked him weeks later why he went to that much trouble for a neighbor he wasn't even close friends with, he looked at me like the question surprised him. "Because that's what you do," he said. "You don't wait for it to be somebody else's job." I paid off the remaining 9 months on Lyle Alvarez's truck loan without telling him I was going to do it. Found the balance through his credit union, called them directly, settled it in full for $1,160. When he called me, voice cracking, asking why, I told him the truth. "You gave my daughter her life back. The least I can give you is one less bill." I also set up a scholarship in Frank's name at the community college in Tulsa, where Lyle's granddaughter was starting nursing school that fall. $2,500 a semester for as long as the girl stayed enrolled. Some debts you can't repay with money, but you can at least try. And trying, it turns out, matters more than people think. As for Mark, the custody hearing that followed was not close. Priscilla Boone laid out the financial records, the unemployment fraud, the hidden accounts, the Dallas trips, the sworn statement from Mr. Alvarez about the night Lily collapsed, and the email that spoke for itself better than any lawyer could have. The judge granted Lily primary custody, with supervised visitation only for Mark, contingent on completed financial counseling and a psychological evaluation. Mark moved to Plano with Jess Whitfield 3 weeks after the hearing, and as far as I know, he sees Nora 4 days a month, always supervised, always through a court-appointed facilitator, because the judge did not take lightly a father who packed a suitcase and left a diabetic woman semi-conscious on a bathroom floor rather than delay a moving timeline. I take no pleasure in saying that plainly. I take no pleasure in any of it, but I also don't apologize for it, because a 4-year-old girl needed somebody in that courtroom telling the truth on her behalf, and I was glad it was us. Lily moved back to Springfield that November. Not into my house. She wanted her own place, and I respected that. but into a 2-bedroom rental 8 minutes from mine on Republic Road. Close enough that Nora could ride her bike to my driveway once she's old enough. Close enough that Sunday dinners aren't something we schedule around excuses anymore. Lily's insurance company let her transfer her position back to the Springfield branch without missing a step, which tells you something about the kind of employee my daughter has always been. Even during the year she was quietly falling apart at home, nobody at that office ever knew. I asked her once, a few months after all of it settled, whether she regretted marrying Mark in the first place. Whether, if she could go back, she'd have seen it coming, the way Jean claimed he had, at that Cracker Barrel table. She thought about it for a long time before she answered. Longer than I expected. I don't think I could have seen all of it, she said. But I think somewhere in me, I knew something was wrong, and I kept telling myself it was normal marriage stuff, because I didn't want to be the kind of woman who gives up. I think that's what he was counting on. That I'd rather be miserable than admit I was wrong. I told her that's not weakness. That's just what love does to good people sometimes. It makes them patient with things that don't deserve patience. And then I told her what I'd learned from watching her on that hospital bed. What I think is maybe the truest thing I figured out in 67 years on this earth. Love isn't proven by how much trouble you're willing to put up with from someone. It's proven by who shows up when the trouble finally arrives, and who's already halfway out the door with the car loaded before anybody asks them to help. I think about that text sometimes. Too much trouble. 14 words meant to keep me 3 hours away on a Tuesday afternoon so nobody would notice the exit already in motion. I think about how close it came to working. How if I'd simply turned that truck around in the parking lot the way any reasonable hurt woman might have, the story ends very differently. And I don't let myself finish that thought all the way through, because I don't have to. It didn't end that way. I sat in that parking lot 40 extra minutes because something in my gut told me the wording was wrong. And Roy Castellano's number came through at 3:06 in the afternoon. And my daughter is alive. And my granddaughter rides her bike down Republic Road most weekends now, with training wheels that are getting looser every month, which Lily says means we'll need to take them off soon. Nora turned 5 this past October. We had the party at my house this time, in the backyard. String lights up along the fence the way Frank always liked them for birthdays. Lyle Alvarez drove up from Tulsa for it, 3.5 hours each way, because I asked him to, and because, as he put it, I wasn't about to miss the party I helped make happen. Lily grilled burgers. Jean brought a sheet cake from the bakery on Sunshine Street that Frank used to love. Nora ran around that yard in a paper birthday crown until 9 o'clock at night, and at one point she climbed up into my lap on the porch swing, sticky with cake frosting, and fell asleep there the way small children do when they finally run themselves all the way out. I sat on that swing a long time after everyone else had gone quiet. My granddaughter's weight settled against my chest, the porch light throwing a soft yellow glow across the yard. And I thought about a parking lot in Tulsa, and a text message calling me too much trouble. And I thought that if being too much trouble means you're the one who stays, the one who drives 3 hours on a hunch, the one who sits in a car 40 extra minutes because something feels wrong, then I hope I stay exactly that kind of trouble for every single day I've got left in me. Because trouble like that, it turns out, is just another word for love that refuses to look away. If you made it this far, I hope this story reminded you of somebody in your own life who showed up when it mattered. Or maybe it reminded you to be that person for someone else. If you enjoyed it, hit that like button, drop a comment, and tell me where you're watching from tonight. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thank you for spending this time with me. I'll see you in the next one.